Seeds of Empire. Vincent Kottori stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching San Francisco's fog roll beneath him like a sea of possibilities. At 38, he commanded a view that matched his ambitions, limitless and above everyone else. His reflection showed a man whose sharp features had hardened over years of calculated decisions. The boyish enthusiasm that once accompanied his coding marathons had been replaced by the cold precision of a business titan. "Your 9 a.m. is waiting, Mr. Kottori," came the steady voice of Priya Desai from the doorway. Vincent didn't turn. "Make them wait another 10 minutes. I want them nervous." Priya hesitated, clipboard pressed against her chest. "They flew in from Tokyo specifically for this meeting. Perhaps did I ask for your opinion?" Vincent cut her off, finally turning. His dark eyes settled on his executive assistant of 4 years, the only person who occasionally dared to challenge him at 32. Priya possessed a quiet dignity that even Vincent's most caustic moods couldn't erode. Her intelligence was evident in her quick, observant eyes, and the efficiency with which she anticipated his needs had made her invaluable. She nodded once and retreated, leaving Vincent alone with his thoughts. Horizon Technologies had been his vision since dropping out of Stanford's computer science program. What began as an algorithm developed in a garage had evolved into the world's most sophisticated predictive analytics platform. Companies paid millions for access to Horizon's insights, and Vincent had become the oracle of Silicon Valley, feared, respected, and increasingly isolated. The path to success had been littered with discarded relationships. Friends became employees, then former employees. Romantic partners discovered they were competing with an insatiable ambition. His parents had stopped calling after he missed his father's funeral for an investor meeting. Vincent told himself it was the necessary cost of greatness. Only Priya remained constant, managing his life with a dedication that bordered on devotion. She worked the same punishing hours he did, cancelled her vacations when crises emerged, and somehow maintained her composure when he lashed out during moments of stress. "Mr. Kottori," Priya's voice came through the intercom. "The Tokyo delegation is getting restless, and the board needs your decision on the Meridian acquisition by noon." Vincent straightened his custom suit jacket. "Send them in." The meeting proceeded like dozens before it, Vincent dominating the room with a mixture of brilliance and intimidation. The Japanese executives left with a licensing agreement that favored Horizon overwhelmingly, and Vincent's reputation for ruthless negotiation intact. Later that evening, as most employees had gone home, Priya entered his office with a stack of documents requiring his signature. The city lights twinkled behind him as he reviewed each page with meticulous attention. "You should eat something," Priya said, placing a container of his favorite sushi beside the papers. "You've had nothing since breakfast." Vincent glanced up, momentarily surprised by the gesture. "How did you know I'd be working late?" "You're always working late before product launches," she replied with a small smile, "especially ones as important as Horizon Nexus." He nodded, realizing she knew his patents better than anyone. "The Nexus platform will revolutionize how businesses understand consumer behavior. 5 years of work culminating in next week's launch." "I know," Priya said softly. "I've been here for 4 of those years." Something in her tone made Vincent look at her more carefully. There were shadows under her eyes, and a weariness that hadn't been there when she'd first joined Horizon. For a fleeting moment, he wondered about her life outside these walls. Did she have family waiting? Friends? Someone who loved her? The thought dissolved as quickly as it formed. Vincent returned to the documents, dismissing her with a wave. "That'll be all for tonight." Priya lingered at the door. "Your brother called again. He said it's about your mother's birthday next weekend." Vincent didn't look up. "Tell him I'm busy. He said she's asking for you specifically." "It's her 70th, I said. I'm busy," Vincent snapped. "Horizon Nexus launches in 8 days. Nothing else matters right now." Priya nodded, her expression carefully neutral as she closed the door behind her. Alone again, Vincent turned to his computer, the blue light illuminating his face as he reviewed the final security protocols for Nexus. The platform contained proprietary algorithms, worth billions, the culmination of his life's work and the key to Horizon's dominance for the next decade. As midnight approached, he finally stepped away from his desk, stretching his stiff shoulders. Through the glass walls of his office, he spotted Priya still at her desk, phone pressed to her ear, her face drawn with concern. She quickly ended the call when she noticed him watching. "Everything all right?" he asked, more out of curiosity than genuine concern. "Just family matters," she replied, quickly gathering her things. "Will you need anything else tonight?" Vincent shook his head, watching as she hurried toward the elevator. For the first time, he wondered what sacrifices Priya made to accommodate his demands, what pieces of her own life she set aside to help build his empire. The thought was uncomfortable. Vincent pushed it away as he returned to his office, focusing instead on the empire he was building. People would remember his name for generations. That was worth any price, especially when others were the ones paying it. The morning of the Horizon Nexus launch dawned with an electric anticipation that permeated every corner of the company's headquarters. Engineers made last-minute adjustments, marketing teams coordinated with press contacts, and Vincent Kottori paced his office like a caged predator, reviewing his presentation for the 100th time. "Where is Priya?" he demanded when his office phone went unanswered. Marching to her desk, he found it uncharacteristically empty, her computer dark, her usual morning coffee untouched. "She called in about 30 minutes ago," explained Dominic, a nervous intern who happened to be passing by. "Something about a family emergency. She said she'd tried to make it for the launch." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Today of all days," he muttered. The timing couldn't have been worse. Priya managed countless details that made his life function seamlessly, and he'd come to rely on her steady presence during high-stress situations. He retreated to his office, pushing aside the momentary concern that flickered through his mind. Whatever personal crisis Priya was handling would have to wait. Today belonged to Horizon Nexus and the culmination of his vision. The launch was scheduled for 2 p.m., with industry leaders, investors, and tech journalists gathering in the auditorium of the Moscone Center. Vincent stood backstage, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that preceded his most important moments. This was where he excelled, commanding attention, demonstrating brilliance, solidifying his legend. Just as he was about to step on stage, his phone vibrated with a message. To his surprise, it was from Priya. "I'm so sorry. My mother had a stroke. At SF General, we'll try to join later if possible." For a moment, Vincent felt a twinge of sympathy. Then he silenced his phone and strode onto the stage to thunderous applause. The presentation was masterful. Vincent walked the audience through the revolutionary capabilities of Horizon Nexus, demonstrating how its predictive analytics could transform industries from healthcare to finance to retail. The crowd responded with increasing enthusiasm, and Vincent felt the intoxicating power of having hundreds of influential people hanging on his every word. Then, halfway through the demonstration, a murmur began rippling through the audience. Vincent noticed several attendees looking down at their phones, whispering to neighbors. A sense of unease crept up his spine as he continued his presentation. He was just reaching the climax of his speech when his chief technology officer, James Whitaker, rushed onto the stage and whispered urgently in his ear, "We have a problem. The Nexus source code, it's been leaked online." Vincent's blood ran cold. He managed to finish his presentation on autopilot, but his mind was racing with implications. By the time he exited the stage, his phone was exploding with notifications. Tech blogs were already analyzing portions of the proprietary Horizon Nexus algorithm, the crown jewels of his empire exposed for all to see. Back at headquarters, chaos erupted. Security teams scrambled to identify the breach while legal prepared for the inevitable stock price plummet. Vincent summoned his executive team to the conference room, his rage barely contained. "How the hell did this happen?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the polished table. "Who had access to the complete source code?" James shifted uncomfortably. "Only 7 people had that level of clearance. Me, our 3 lead developers, the head of security, and Priya." Vincent finished, a dangerous edge to his voice. "Well, yes," James admitted. "As your executive assistant, she needed access to all confidential materials." Vincent's mind raced through the morning's events. Priya's absence, the convenient family emergency on launch day, the timing of the leak coinciding perfectly with his presentation when all eyes were on him rather than company security. "Find her," he ordered. Now it took less than an hour for security to locate Priya. She had indeed been at San Francisco General Hospital, but was now on her way back to the office, apparently unaware of the catastrophe that had unfolded. When she entered the conference room, Vincent noticed her red-rimmed eyes and disheveled appearance, so unlike her usual composed self. Before she could speak, he slid a tablet across the table showing headlines about the leak. "Explain this," he said coldly. Priya's eyes widened as she quickly scanned the articles. I don't understand. How did this happen?" "That's exactly what I'd like to know," Vincent replied, his voice dangerously quiet. "Interesting timing, wouldn't you say? You disappear on the most important day in company history, and suddenly our most valuable intellectual property is exposed to the world." The color drained from Priya's face. "You think I did this?" "Vincent, my mother had a stroke this morning. I've been at the hospital since 5 a.m. I would never save it." He cut her off, rising from his chair. "The evidence is damning, Priya. Only 7 people had access to that code, and you're the only one who conveniently vanished today. Check the hospital records," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "Call my family. I was there the entire time until 30 minutes ago." Vincent laughed bitterly. "You're smart enough to create an alibi. Perhaps you set up the leak days ago, timed for maximum damage." "Why would I do that?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I've given 4 years of my life to Horizon, to you. I've sacrificed everything for this company. For money, of course." Vincent's voice was ice. "Our competitors would pay millions for the Nexus algorithm. Or maybe it was revenge for all the times I pushed you too hard." The conference room had grown silent, other executives watching the confrontation with uncomfortable expressions. Priya looked around at their faces, realization dawning that no one was coming to her defense. "I have never betrayed you," she said quietly, dignity returning to her posture despite the tears streaming down her face. "Not once in 4 years." Vincent stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. I trusted you more than anyone, Priya. You were the one person I thought I could count on, and this is how you repay me." He straightened, raising his voice for the benefit of everyone in the room. "Security will escort you to clear your desk. You'll be hearing from our legal team about breach of contract and theft of intellectual property. You're fired." Priya stood frozen, the shock of his accusation visible in every line of her body. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, followed closely by 2 security guards. Vincent turned to his remaining executives. "Damage control. I want to know how much this leak will cost us, how we can mitigate the exposure, and how quickly we can implement the contingency algorithms." As the team dispersed to their assignments, Vincent retreated to his office, ignoring the whispers that followed him. The betrayal cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He'd allowed Priya closer than anyone else in years, and she had exploited that trust. Later that night, as he worked tirelessly to salvage what remained of his triumph, a junior assistant timidly entered his office. "Mr. Katori, Ms. Desai left this for you before she departed." She placed a sealed envelope on his desk. Vincent stared at it, fury reigniting. "Get rid of it," he snapped. The assistant hesitated. "She insisted it was important." "I said get rid of it," Vincent roared. The startled assistant grabbed the envelope and retreated quickly. Vincent turned back to his computer, pushing all thoughts of Priya from his mind. He had an empire to save, and sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford. The envelope, with its unread contents, was filed away in the archives, forgotten as Vincent threw himself into rebuilding what he had lost, never suspecting how those sealed pages would one day change everything. Hollow victory. 3 years passed like a fever dream for Vincent Katori. The leaked Nexus code had cost Horizon Technologies billions in market value and months of litigation. But from the ashes, Vincent had engineered a remarkable recovery. His company now stood taller than ever, having acquired 4 competitors and launched a revolutionary new platform that made Nexus seem primitive by comparison. On paper, Vincent had won. The Wall Street Journal had recently called him Silicon Valley's Phoenix, the man who had transformed potential ruination into unprecedented success. His personal fortune had tripled. His influence extended into politics, philanthropy, and academia. He had everything he'd ever wanted, and none of it filled the strange emptiness that had taken residence in his chest. "The Beijing investors are impressed with the quarterly projections," reported Russell Chen, Vincent's new executive assistant. Russell was efficient, anticipatory, and impeccably professional, everything Vincent had demanded after Priya's betrayal. Yet something crucial seemed missing, though Vincent refused to examine what that might be. "Good," Vincent replied absently, scanning the morning's emails. "Schedule a follow-up call for next week, and move my dinner with the governor to Thursday." "Already done," Russell replied. "Also, the renovations to the executive floor begin tomorrow. Facilities needs you to clear any essential items from your office by this evening." Vincent nodded, barely registering the information. Since Priya's departure, he'd cycled through a succession of assistants, romantic partners, and executive teams. People entered his orbit, served their purpose, and inevitably departed, either pushed away by his increasingly demanding standards or leaving of their own accord, unable to withstand his emotional detachment. Later that evening, as the office emptied and the cleaning crew began their nightly rounds, Vincent found himself alone in the space he'd occupied for nearly 8 years. The contemporary furniture and minimalist decor would be replaced with something even more impressive. A physical manifestation of Horizon's continued ascension. He opened his desk drawers, carelessly tossing items into a box. Most of it was meaningless, outdated technology, promotional materials from long-forgotten conferences, business cards of people whose faces he could no longer recall. In the bottom drawer, he found a photograph from Horizon's 5th anniversary celebration. There he stood, rare smile on his face, champagne flute raised in triumph, and beside him, Priya, her expression a mixture of pride and something else he couldn't quite identify. Vincent stared at her image, struck by how vividly he remembered her voice, her mannerisms, the subtle ways she'd managed to keep him grounded. The betrayal still stung. After her departure, the investigation had never conclusively proven her guilt, but Vincent had needed someone to blame. It was cleaner that way, neater, a simple narrative that allowed him to move forward without questioning his judgment. He tossed the photograph into the box and moved to the credenza where he kept files too sensitive for digital storage. As he emptied the drawers, he came across a cardboard storage container labeled Archives 2022 in neat handwriting he instantly recognized as Priya's. Vincent hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were documents from the tumultuous period following the Nexus launch, legal briefs, crisis management strategies, press statements denying vulnerabilities that had later been exposed. Beneath these papers lay a cream-colored envelope, slightly yellowed with age, his name written in Priya's elegant handwriting. The envelope she had tried to give him the day he fired her, the one he had ordered destroyed. Vincent sat heavily in his chair, turning the envelope over in his hands. For 3 years, he had successfully avoided any thought of Priya Desai. He'd blocked her emails, instructed HR never to mention her name, and directed his legal team to handle her severance through intermediaries. He had excised her from his life as precisely as a surgeon removes a tumor, yet here was this artifact, preserved by some administrative oversight, challenging the narrative he'd constructed. Vincent stared at the envelope for a long moment before finally breaking the seal. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the handwriting less steady than he remembered. Written, he realized, on the worst day of her professional life. Vincent, by the time you read this I will be gone from Horizon, and perhaps this letter will never reach you, but I owe you my truth after 4 years at your side. I did not betray you. I would never betray you. The morning of the Nexus launch, my mother suffered a massive stroke that doctors weren't sure she would survive the night. I was at San Francisco General from 5:14 a.m. until 1:40 p.m. You can verify this with hospital security footage, staff records, or my family members who were present. I didn't tell you the severity because I knew how important the launch was. I thought I could handle both crises without burdening you with my personal troubles. I was trying to be as dedicated to Horizon as you've always been. I understand that in business, perception often matters more than truth. You needed someone to blame for the leak, and I was the convenient scapegoat. Perhaps that was my final service to you and the company, absorbing this blow so you could move forward. Despite everything, I am grateful for our years together. I learned from you every day. Your brilliance, your vision, your relentless drive. I only wish you could have seen that my loyalty to you was the one thing that never wavered. My mother's condition means I will be her caretaker for the foreseeable future. I've accepted that my professional reputation is destroyed, but I could not leave without telling you that I kept my integrity intact, even if you believe otherwise. May you find everything you're looking for. Vincent. Vincent read the letter 3 times, each reading sending a different kind of pain through his chest. He set it down carefully on his desk and opened his laptop, fingers trembling slightly as he accessed Horizon's security archives. It took him less than 30 minutes to confirm Priya's story. Hospital visitor logs showed her arrival at 5:14 a.m. on the day of the launch. Security footage from San Francisco General clearly showed her in the waiting room, by her mother's bedside, speaking with doctors during the exact hours when the Nexus code was being uploaded to anonymous servers in Eastern Europe. Further investigation revealed that the actual source of the leak had been identified months after Priya's departure, a disgruntled junior developer who had gained unauthorized access through a security flaw. The information had been buried in a confidential settlement, deemed too embarrassing to disclose after the public narrative had already been established. Priya had been innocent all along. Vincent sat motionless as night fell over San Francisco, the city lights blurring through the windows of his soon-to-be-renovated office. The emptiness in his chest expanded until he could barely breathe. For 3 years, he had built his recovery on a foundation of righteous anger, the betrayal of his most trusted ally justifying his increasing isolation and emotional detachment. Now that foundation had crumbled, and Vincent was left facing an uncomfortable truth. He had wronged the one person who had never wronged him. He picked up his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found Russell's number. "Cancel the renovation," he said without preamble, "and find me everything you can about Priya Desai, current address, employment, phone number, everything, sir." Russell sounded confused. "The contractors are scheduled to cancel it," Vincent repeated firmly. "This is priority 1, Russell. I need this information by morning." After ending the call, Vincent looked again at the photograph from Horizon's 5th anniversary. He had been so focused on what he was building that he had never noticed what was right beside him. Someone who believed in his vision as much as he did, who shouldered his burdens without complaint, who saw both his brilliance and his flaws and remained loyal anyway. For the first time in his adult life, Vincent Kottori felt the full weight of regret. His empire suddenly seemed a poor substitute for the trust he had shattered, the loyalty he had discarded, and the woman whose life he had carelessly appended in service to his ambition. Outside his window, San Francisco continued its relentless pace, people building, striving, connecting, and separating in the eternal dance of human relationships. Vincent had always considered himself above such entanglements, focused on a legacy that would outlast any personal connection. Now he wondered what legacy truly mattered, and whether some damages could never be repaired, no matter how much power or wealth you commanded. The search. Vincent sleek Tesla glided through the morning fog as he left San Francisco behind. Russell had delivered a comprehensive dossier on Priya Desai's life after Horizon, a life drastically different from the one she had led at his side. After her mother's death 18 months ago, Priya had moved to Mendocino, a small coastal town 3 hours north of San Francisco. There, she had used her modest savings to purchase a struggling community arts center, transforming it into a vibrant hub for local artists and children's education programs. That there was no trace of the corporate executive assistant who had once managed billion-dollar deals and navigated the shark-infested waters of Silicon Valley. According to Russell's research, Priya now lived in a small cottage near the coast, drove a 10-year-old Subaru, and volunteered teaching computer skills to seniors at the local library. The highway hugged the coastline, offering breathtaking views that Vincent barely noticed. His mind replayed their final confrontation, her tears, her pleading, the absolute conviction with which he had condemned her. He had been so certain of his judgment, so unwavering in his righteousness. 3 hours later, Vincent parked outside a weathered Victorian building with a hand-painted sign, Coastal Horizon Arts Center. The irony of the name wasn't lost on him. Through the large windows, he could see a spacious room where a dozen children sat at tables, engrossed in what appeared to be a pottery class. And there, moving between tables with encouraging smiles, was Priya. She looked different, her once sleek corporate attire replaced by jeans and a casual sweater, her previously straightened hair now falling in natural waves around her shoulders. Yet there was something else, something beyond the superficial changes in appearance. She moved with a lightness he had never seen during their years together, her smile reaching her eyes in a way it rarely had at Horizon. Vincent remained in his car, suddenly uncertain. What exactly had he come here to do? Apologize? Make amends? Offer her old job back? None of these options seemed adequate to address the magnitude of his error. As he watched, the class ended and parents arrived to collect their children. Priya knelt to speak with a young girl who proudly displayed her clay creation, both of them laughing at something Vincent couldn't hear. The scene made the knot in his chest tighten further. When the last child had departed, Vincent finally stepped out of his car and approached the entrance. A small bell chimed as he pushed open the door, and Priya looked up from where she was cleaning tables. The recognition in her eyes was immediate, followed by a complex series of emotions that Vincent couldn't fully decipher. Surprise, wariness, perhaps a flash of the old pain. "Vincent," she said simply, straightening to her full height. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil that must have accompanied his unexpected appearance. "Priya," he replied, suddenly feeling awkward in a way that Vincent Katori, titan of industry, never felt. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Just cleaning up after the children's class." She gestured to the clay-smeared tables. "What brings the CEO of Horizon Technologies to a small-town arts center?" There was no hostility in her question, just genuine curiosity, which somehow made it worse. Vincent would have preferred anger. It would have been easier to navigate than this calm composure. "I found your letter," he said, the words falling inadequately into the space between them. "The one you left that day." Priya's hand stilled on the table she was wiping. "I see." She set down her cloth and turned to face him fully. "That was a long time ago, Vincent. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. He replied automatically, then immediately regretted the precision. It made him sound as though he'd been counting, which in some unconscious way, perhaps he had been. Priya's expression softened slightly. "Would you like some tea?" "I was about to make some." Vincent nodded, following her to a small kitchen area at the back of the studio. The space was warm and lived in, with children's artwork covering the walls and mismatched furniture that somehow formed a cohesive whole. "I checked the hospital records," Vincent said as Priya filled an electric kettle, "and the security investigation that was completed after you left. You were telling the truth." Priya turned to look at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Yes," she said simply. "I owe you an apology," Vincent continued, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. When was the last time he had genuinely apologized to anyone? "What I did to you was unforgivable. I jumped to conclusions. I refused to listen." You did what you always do," Priya interrupted gently. "You made a decisive judgment based on the information you had, and you acted on it without hesitation or doubt. It's what made you successful, Vincent. It's who you are." Her lack of bitterness was disarming. Vincent had prepared for recrimination, for the opportunity to defend himself or offer compensation. He hadn't prepared for understanding. "It ruined your career," he said. "Your reputation." Priya poured hot water into 2 mugs, adding tea bags with practiced movements. "It changed my path," she corrected. "There's a difference." She handed him a mug and led him to a small sitting area by the window overlooking the Pacific Ocean. They sat in silence for a moment, the rhythmic sound of waves filling the space where words should have been. "Are you happy here?" Vincent finally asked, genuinely curious. Priya considered the question. "I found purpose here," she answered carefully. "After my mother passed, I needed to rebuild, not just my career, but my sense of self. This place needed someone who believed in its potential. The children needed someone who believed in theirs." She paused, looking out at the ocean. "So yes, I'm happy." Vincent followed her gaze to the horizon where sea met sky. "I built Horizon into something twice as valuable after you left," he said, not as a boast but as a simple statement of fact. "Expanded into new markets, acquired our biggest competitors, doubled our workforce." "I know," Priya smiled. "I still follow the business news." "I know," Priya smiled. "I still follow the business news. None of it means what I thought it would," Vincent admitted. Surprising himself with the confession, Priya studied him over the rim of her mug. "What did you think it would mean?" Vincent struggled to articulate the emptiness that had plagued him despite his mounting successes. "I thought each achievement would feel significant, that building something lasting would be enough. And it's not. Not when it's built on shifting sand." Vincent met her eyes directly. "Not when it's built on lies," I told myself. "Not when the cost includes people who deserved better." The afternoon light cast long shadows across the room as they really talked for the first time in years. Vincent learned about Priya's mother's final months, about her decision to leave the corporate world behind, about the joy she found in teaching children to express themselves through art in turn. He shared the hollow nature of his recent triumphs, the revolving door of employees who feared rather than respected him, the growing sense that his legacy might be measured in dollars rather than impact. As sunset painted the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, Vincent finally asked the question that had driven him 3 hours north of San Francisco. Priya, I came here to ask if you would consider coming back to Horizon, not as my assistant, as our new chief operations officer. The board would approve it immediately on my recommendation. Your salary would be no, Priya interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. I can't go back. Vincent, though he had half expected this answer, the finality of it still stung. We could structure it however you want. You could split your time between San Francisco and Mendocino. I would ensure that it's not about the logistics. She cut in. I've built something meaningful here, something that matters to me and to this community. She gestured around them at the arts center. This is my horizon now. Vincent nodded slowly, understanding washing over him. I've interrupted your life again, he said, rising to his feet. I should go. Priya stood as well. I'm glad you found my letter. Vincent, I'm glad you know the truth. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry, Vincent said, the words feeling simultaneously inadequate and essential. I know, Priya replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added, maybe what you need isn't to rebuild the past, but to find a new horizon of your own. The reckoning 6 months later. Vincent stood on the deck of the newly renovated Coastal Horizon Arts Center, watching a crowd gather for the grand reopening. The expansion had doubled the facility's capacity, adding dedicated spaces for music, digital arts, and a small theater for performances. He had not returned to San Francisco after his first visit to Mendocino. Instead, he had taken up residence in a nearby beach house, initially telling himself it was a temporary retreat to gain perspective. Days had turned to weeks, weeks to months, and gradually Vincent had begun to see his life through a different lens. Horizon Technologies now operated under the leadership of James Whitaker, with Vincent retaining his position as chairman but surrendering daily operations. The company continued to thrive, perhaps even more so without the shadow of Vincent's demanding presence looming over every decision. Nervous, Priya appeared beside him, clipboard in hand. Some habits never changed. Terrified, Vincent admitted with a small smile, I've launched billion-dollar platforms with less anxiety. Priya laughed. The sound still new enough to surprise him. Teaching a digital arts class to teenagers is definitely more challenging than addressing shareholders. When Vincent had approached Priya with the proposal to fund the arts center's expansion, he had been careful to structure it as a proper business arrangement rather than charity. The Vincent Katori Foundation would provide the capital, while Priya would maintain full operational control. In return, Vincent would develop and teach the center's new technology curriculum, bringing his expertise to students who might otherwise never have access to such education. The arrangement had initially raised Priya's eyebrows. You want to teach? She had asked incredulously. You, who once said that explaining things twice was a waste of valuable mental resources. Vincent had shrugged. People change, or at least, they can try to. Now, as the ribbon-cutting ceremony approached, Vincent surveyed the community that had cautiously accepted his presence over the past months. There were the local artists who had initially viewed him with suspicion, the children who had no idea of his former status but were excited about the new computers, and the town officials grateful for the investment in their community's cultural life. A teenage girl approached, tablet in hand. I was wondering if you could help me with this coding problem before the ceremony. Of course, Jenna, Vincent replied, following her to one of the new workstations. Priya watched them go, a complex emotion crossing her face. When Vincent had first reappeared in her life, she had been certain his presence would reopen old wounds. Instead, she had witnessed something she never expected. Vincent Katori learning to value something beyond power and success. The relationship between them had evolved into something neither could have anticipated. Not romance, that bridge had been thoroughly burned, but a partnership, based on mutual respect and a shared vision for what the arts center could become. They had developed a careful friendship, navigating the jagged edges of their history with increasing grace. Later, as the ceremonial ribbon was cut and applause filled the air, Vincent found himself standing slightly apart from the celebration, observing rather than dominating the moment. A new position for a man accustomed to being the center of attention. Priya joined him, handing him a glass of champagne. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman. Another successful launch. This one matters more, Vincent said quietly. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as visitors explored the new facilities. Children raced from room to room, elderly community members admired the gallery space, and local artists discussed future collaborations. I received another offer from Techstrata yesterday, Priya mentioned casually. VP of Operations, International Division, very generous compensation package. Vincent felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. Are you considering it? Priya shook her head. I turned them down this morning. My place is here. She paused, studying his expression. Does that surprise you? No, Vincent replied honestly. But it does make me wonder if you ever regret how things turned out. If you ever miss the person you might have become if I hadn't derailed your career. Priya considered this. I don't think either of us became the people we expected to be, she said finally. But I'm not certain that's a tragedy. She gestured around them at the bustling art center. Some detours lead to better destinations. Vincent nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. The path he had charted for himself, the relentless pursuit of success at any cost, had led to a hollow victory. It had taken losing everything that truly mattered to recognize what he actually valued. I've been thinking about expanding the Foundation's work, he said after a moment. There are other communities that could benefit from similar programs. Planning your next empire? Priya asked with a raised eyebrow, though her tone was light. Planning a different legacy, Vincent corrected. One measured in impact rather than acquisitions. As the celebration continued around them, Vincent realized that he had finally found what had been missing, not in the achievements that had defined his previous life, but in the simple act of creating something that improved the lives of others. He had come to Mendocino, seeking forgiveness for past wrongs, perhaps even hoping to reclaim what he had lost. Instead, he had found something he never knew: he needed redemption through purpose, and the quiet understanding that some bridges, once burned, could be rebuilt into different, sometimes stronger, structures. The billionaire who had fired her in anger had indeed fallen apart years later, but not in the way either of them could have predicted. He had fallen apart to rebuild himself into someone worthy of the second chance. He had been given. As the sun set over the Pacific, casting golden light across the community they had built together, Vincent and Priya raised their glasses in a silent toast, not to what might have been but to what still could be.